But there's a lot going on in your community. I have to ask you, just get to break the seal on this. Now, you was a resident here. You lifelong. You bleed Vegas. I appreciate that. I truly do. I bleed Vegas now. A little bit. A little bit. But the Moulin Rouge. Yeah, we're going to get right on in it. Because I got a guest. But we're going to talk about it for a few seconds. What does the Moulin Rouge mean to you?
So let me tell you.
Tell me.
Sarah Ann Purdy Knight is a very good friend of the family. I've heard stories with my father and my aunt and my mother, you know, during the time going there. A lot of the strip entertainers would come off the strip and perform there and hang out. You have to remember there was a time when blacks were not allowed on the strips. They weren't even allowed to deal in the casinos. They were able to deal in Reno before they could even deal in Las Vegas. So I don't think a lot of people know that history. However, when I got old enough and the Rouge was like the going on spot to be on a Saturday, and I wasn't quite old enough. And I thought that, but wait a second, I thought that because Sarah Ann was a good friend of the family, that she would kind of let me go on and go through, standing in line when she saw me. And she said, no, go home. And I said, but no, just this one time. No, go home. So finally, Franklin, when I turned 21, I was so excited I could not wait to get there, because that was the party spot. That was the spot. So, get there.
But wasn't it closed down, though? I mean...
No, it reopened.
Right, okay.
So, with my memory, I remember when, you know, hearing the stories of when the entertainers from the strip would come over. Right, and perform. And it stayed open for a while. During that time, I wasn't even thought of. So it closed down, but I think, if I can remember, it seems to me that it's opened and closed like 2 or 3 different times. Because I definitely remember when Sarah Ann was running it. Anyways, so finally when I turned 21, it was still happening. It was like still the going on spot. And was in line again. Sarah Ann comes out just to, you know, take a look, check the lines. And I say, Sarah, Miss Sarah Ann, I'm 21 now. I'm 21 now. I can come in. She said, no, go home. And I said, but no, showing her my ID. No, I'm 21 now. Excited, sent me home. Sent me home. So I did get a chance to hang out there a couple of times, but not while she was there. So anyways, I've seen pictures and I've heard stories from my parents. And when I tell you, it was like, it was the spot. It was where you got we got our black entertainers. I believe Nat King Cole. I've heard stories of all these great musicians that could not perform on the strip, that they would come there. So I think, I don't know, I think it should have been a historical land site.
All right.
I really just think
well, as you know, last night they had a town hall meeting. Now, y'all need to look up the definition of town hall meeting, because the ones I know, talking about our founding fathers of this great nation, quotation marks, and you know all that other good stuff. Those town hall meetings were ruckus. They were you know, feisty. It was like, you know a town hall meeting, what it's supposed to be, up in people's faces and necks, addressing the American spirit. So our town hall meeting was that last night in our community. And again, I first off, I give the greatest kudos. I'm serious. Street cred. You could sneak on the train with me anytime. I hold the door open for you in the movie theater. I go buy your liquor, whatever. Street cred, whatever makes it credible for you. Street cred got to go to the commissioner, Mr. Lawrence Weekly. Now, I know we have different issues from time to time, but that's what family do. Sometimes they got to be some furniture moving. You wrong, and you got to be called out. And that goes for me, too, because they come up in here looking for Frank.
Yeah, they do.
Big shout out to the commissioner for taking it to the community and letting the community expose themselves. Because that's what it was. Don Corleone was sitting up there. Kudos to the commissioner. Kudos. He didn't have to do it. he also brought with him the the county manager, and they watched our community. All right, I'm gonna be part of it, even though I don't live in 89106 or whatever it is. But
it's a part of
Commissioner, you get the big crew. Yes, you sit at the table. You ran that table like Fats. Y'all know Minnesota Fats. If they said they let him shoot, he gonna shot 6 or 7 balls going. Commissioner, you ran the table on him because the opportunity the community had from several different advents to express what they wanted to do. He let them talk. I mean, my grandfather just let you talk. He wouldn't say nothing. Just let you go ahead and dig that hole. And they sure did. It was a town hall meeting, and this town ain't ready. I'm going to put it out there. You know how I do. It was good turnout. In spite of the fact...
It was good turnout.
In spite of the fact that our community is separated. Because at the same time, you had the community members worried about what's happening. I got to do this. The youth, the YP, the young urban professionals, and some other young folks, all y'all 500. Mr. Devin Moore's group had a party. And at the same time this meeting was going on, he touted that there were almost 600 Negroes of melanated nature at a party. Peep that out. We had the community, had an opportunity to talk to some doers and shakers, and at the same time, the future of our community. I'm not putting you down, Mr. Moore. I'm putting you out there. You and the 582 people that you put on Facebook that you said you was partying with. You was partying, driving on your car with your roof down. I appreciate you, Mr. Moore. You know, I'm not giving you this out of negativity. I'm calling you young people out. Young urban professionals under the Urban League. Where were y'all? At a party while the community was talking about really your historical past and your future. Because a lot of y'all still live in that neighborhood. Or you still got family that's about to be pushed out of that neighborhood.
Sure are.
And you going to be the ones talking about, I remember when the West Side was black. But I was out partying with Devin Moore and the boys and the girls and the thoughts and the hoochie. Don't get me wrong, I've been to them parties. I got to put it out there. But they got to come to the meetings. You had over 600 youth, people who the determination of what's happening with the Moulin Rouge will affect you, will affect your blackness. So that's the definition. That's the definition of the community. We had the community leaders. The room was packed over at the Pearson Center. We had some elected officials. Some. Where were you? Mr. McCurdy, your father was there, but this is your community and you weren't there. And I got to call out my man Ricky Barlow. Maybe on their part, maybe it was I'll give them a mafioso move. There was no upside to coming to this meeting for them. So they didn't show. So maybe they weren't invited, maybe they didn't know, but the commissioner, you get my hat, you get my gloves, you got street cred because you put it out there for the community to allow the community to come up to the microphone and tell their idea. Oh, y'all texting. But you allowed the community to come up there and say, I got this, I got that, and you did this, and you did that. Now this is banking. This is simple numbers in banking. And I do appreciate the effort that the people who want to have their vision put forward took time to come and talk. They took time to say, I have this dollar, and I want this to happen in this way. And that opportunity was provided. That's leadership, Commissioner. Again, kudos to you. Because for the people who were there, and I mean all the groups were there, the regular groups, yes, you know, the this, the that. And I even got to give a big shout out to Minister Stretch. He came with some of his group. The youthful connection we need. Not the urban professionals who are out partying and hanging out with my brother Devin Moore. And I say that with love, my brother. You should have told him to come to the function first, just to show numbers to represent the commissioner's interest, and then go to the party. And then if you was at the meeting, I give you a little ticket, you get a free drink. That's how you can induce that's how Mayor Dinkins got elected. We had parties in clubs, and then we shut the music off and let them talk for a minute and passed around a trash bag. Trash bags. Good. They were man, just put $1 in here. That's how we got the mayor elected. We partied with a purpose, as some people like to say in our community. But the reality is we had the community leaders out there. They were talking about the Moulin Rouge, and half our community was out partying, whose future makes a difference to, and the leadership doesn't seem to think they need to bring those people in the fold. Because we're in election season. Now, don't get me wrong, my favorite congressman wasn't there. But as representative, I think I saw. But at the same time, I saw folks in the community who talked about the Moulin Rouge, and we ain't got nothing. Nothing. Nobody who said they had a comprehensive plan that could help. Come on. This is banking. You can't blame the city. They don't just want the investment money. They want your FICO score for the next 5 years to be at a minimum that you could sustain the property over your 3 or 4 phases. And then also have enough money that you could keep it afloat for 6 or 7 months of business. Now, bless me. I got millionaires in my family. And they even talk amongst themselves. And sometimes, you know, I hang out because it's my younger brother. You know, I get to get in that room with my dad. I'm not part of that, you know, the family, but I am in the family trust, so I got to vote. Then I can throw my weight around. In any event, you got to have the money to not just build the project, not just to secure the property. You need to have money for the future restoration of the property and its existence for 6 to 7 months. That's the facts. And the banks don't play anymore. All they got to do is punch in the numbers, and they see what you got, where you had it, and who you owe. So everybody who spoke yesterday with a plan, if it was real, the bank would have taken your money. Because the project probably would have fallen anyway, and they would be able to capitalize on your original investment and then sell it again, which is what they've done several times to the Moulin Rouge. So I'm saying, big shout out again to the commissioner. We got a guest. I'm going to move on. I know you want to talk about the Moulin Rouge. I'll be up in here on Wednesday. I ain't scared. There's no, screener. But the bottom line is, while half the community, the leadership of the community, was proposing to do things they wanted to do, the youth of the community was out partying. 582-year-old urban professionals, the younger folks, whose decision is going to be when you can say, I remember when. Just like Sheryl told us she remembered when.
Wow. Yeah.
No offense, because Negroes was whack. And don't get me wrong, some of the Negroes who spoke yesterday were in leadership at the time when the whackness was going on.
But you know what, Franklyn?
y'all
I
just
think
still
with this younger generation who missed the Moulin Rouge or whose parents were too young to remember it, you know, I know the history of it because of my parents. And I got to experience it. Not at the same height that they did, but I got the experience. I have like a whole bunch of stories I could tell you about the Moulin Rouge. It's really like a part of my history.
Your culture.
And the black, exactly.
But at the same time,
it really is. So I wonder, like, this younger generation just don't know about it.
It ain't theirs.
They don't even know they don't even understand the history and even what it did for the community back then.
Right.
I'd have to say that, you know, back in the 20s when everybody started coming to Las Vegas, where the different cultures came in on the West, is where they put the African American and Hispanics. And as time passed and they've nurtured this West Side, it grew, coming in with churches and the praise of God. And everybody, they made it their community. A community where everybody was proud to be part of Las Vegas, where the entertainers back in the 50s and 60s, they had to come to the West Side at the Moulin Rouge, where, you know, they relaxed.
How it employed our parents, our grandparents, you know? So I think that they just don't know.
Right.
They just don't know. And then I would have to question, do they even care to know?
No, they don't care to know. Because the youth leadership doesn't take them in that direction. They out shaking it and drinking and making heaven good. I ain't faulting that. But you got to take care of business first. And that's what I'm saying is, if the leadership had directed even, and I'm going to put this not just with you, Mr. Moore's group, there are other youthful groups out there who weren't there, and there were other leadership groups who weren't there either. I don't even know what happened to the Urban League. We never can get them on the phone or nothing. They used to own that facility and run it. Now we can't even find them. And I'm talking about the leadership in form of Mr. Kevin Hooks. I'm talking about the leadership of also the people who were on the board of directors at that organization. So, you know, the Moulin Rouge, it's the people may not know, it's the apartments that are right by, it's right off of Bonanza. They're going to tear that whole area down. That's all I can tell you.
They're
and it's
already.
Right, but I would tell you just like this, even if, and I do appreciate the fact that the commissioner, again, open for dialogue. We're going to move into our guest. This is the last thing I'm going to tell you. Even if the county owns it or the city owns it, city people who were not present to discuss it, at the end of the time, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Weekly explained the facts. And that's when I departed. Because the facts are that the county would taking a bid or doing whatever they had to do if it was appropriate in the time span that was granted to them. While there has been several people who've claimed to own it, the person who owns it is making the decisions and has nothing to do with any of those people who were speaking yesterday. I don't care how much money you got. He ain't taking your money. He wants to go in a different direction. And that's the seller's prior prerogative. I don't have to sell my house to you if I don't want it. If I don't think that your business is faulty, I will not give it to you either. So don't get me wrong. The owner does what he wants. Black people don't own it. Let it go. Like Teddy Pendergrass said, I think it's a TKO. I think I better let it go. It's another love T. Y'all love it. That's cool. We never owned it.
No, we never did.
Never owned it. Never rolled one. Never sold one. Never owned it. And y'all Negroes holding on to it like you did, like you ran it. I don't care if you danced in there. I don't care if your mama danced in there. All she did was dance. So give her new dancing shoes and let's move on. We did not own that. Let it go, Negroes. Be for real. People talking about they're going to spend $350 million. Ah! You ain't dragging them folks off the strip. They already got plans for this community, and it's already been divided up, and it's still being divided up. So no harm intended to anybody who's worked. And the bottom line is the system is predicated on making the best investment for the money and the most highest return on the money, which is turning the entire West Side into high-rise condos. Turning the entire West Side into high-rise condos. Turning the West Side into high-rise condos.
That's prime real estate right there, though, right? That's prime real estate.
Uh-oh. See that? You see that? I can't even tell you what just walked into the studio. But in any event, their intention is to turn that area into high-rise condos and force all of that generically black neighborhood into a high-rise condo economic neighborhood we cannot afford to live in. I know we got phone callers, and I'm not taking them right now because we got a guest. We're not taking no callers. I'm ventilating. I'm sorry.
That's prime real estate.
It is
right
because
there.
they're going to build high-rise condos just like they have in other major cities. It's not about the land acquisition so forth for a single home. You can put, now that you own corners, through with a property that was called assemblage, you'll get them to put new water infrastructure in, which they're already doing. They're already building the infrastructure to capacitate these high-rise houses.
So let me ask you, so what we see around this station may
Done.
not be here anymore?
Done.
But
Because 582 of the urban youth professionals, the future leaders of our community, were out partying. So here you go. We're going to get into our guests. I know that's that. But also recognize that once the community turns and the county or the city places the youth center or rehabilitation center they want there for community outreach, it becomes city property, right? A community center, right? Now, every rap movie I ever seen, they was closing the community rec center down. The city property was going to close it down to industrialize or build that neighborhood up. So we might as well bring Heavy D back and the boys. Because this is a rap movie in the making right here. I'm calling in, Frank Adamas. Yes, they're going to build that property what the county wants, whatever the city wants, which will be a youth or a rec center, that they can definitely, when that situation turns, they're going to sell that property and build another high-rise right there. Because they're building a high-rise right here next to Gay Park. That park been closed for 4-5 years. Why you think the city ain't building on it? Park is closed to the community of taxpayers. He stopped texting. Park is closed to the community taxpayers who've been paying taxes, and that's a big park. Try to close down the park where I live for 2 or 3 years. I don't care how many homeless out there. But that park is closed down, and they're going to build a high-rise right along the highway. They're going to make high-rises all of the 89106. And last night's community effort to at least dialogue through the commissioner's office proved very fruitful to me. Because none of those Negroes or groups or whoever has ideas is really going to have any say of what's going on, nor that they have the capital or the capital investment to make it happen. But again, kudos to the commissioner for allowing the community to expose itself and see that the same people who try to have been making money and profiting. I'm not going to say we don't need a casino. I'm going to say we don't need a casino.
I second that.
So I don't know what to say on that. All I can tell you is the reality is the community still splits. Nobody's fault. Not putting anybody out there. We're just talking facts. It's just such that we're out here doing different things, and the community needs to be united on one front at certain meetings, and the meetings need to take a certain fold, and we need the input of the future and as well as the past. So again, we're going to move on to our guest who's allowed me this little bit of gracious time, because he's going to be back in here on Wednesday night. He has a show. He does the internet thing. He's last year's highest rated or award-winning best internet radio program, and I would call it for blackness because it was given by black people. in the form of Brother Keidi. He tells us what to eat. He tells us how to live. He tells us about the future on the continent in Africa, how we need to invest our money in our community, how he brings a broader perspective of what I would call black futurism to the global black perspective. And that's important. So again, we're going to get off the Moulin Rouge because the Moulin Rouge exposes so many things like we see in our community. Brother Keidi, as you know, having been on the continent so many times, and as you know, working in so many cities, you tell us what to do, and we just don't get it. It's not intergenerational. It's just compatibility and working together. And I do appreciate the time you granted to talk to us, because we did have some dialogue with one of my guests were here. Brother Keidi, how you living? What's cracking, brother? Let me leave out one more thing. I tell you, he's an author too. He, man, he need a hologram. He does everything. I know what he do.
And a chef.
We do the best we can with what the Creator has blessed us with. Always seeking to deepen the blessing by doing even more. And we've been very, very busy. This topic we've chosen for today, we call the Great AIDS Hoax. The Great AIDS Hoax. A lot of people are shocked when I say AIDS and hoax in the same sentence. I'm not the first to say it, and I have been consistently saying it now for about 25 years and published extensively on this.
You published back 25 years ago on this subject.
That's right. So let's get our people to understand what the basics are here. And it really comes down to three basic areas, even though, as you can tell, the science of this goes in and out of microbiology, demographics. It goes into eugenics, which is the deliberate control of population. So I am a scientist, and people need to understand what I mean when I say that I am a scientist. George Washington Carver was a scientist. Shikanji Jha was a scientist. Two of the greatest scientists of the 20th century were people of African descent. So why should we have any qualms about claiming scientific achievement? And on this subject, HIV/AIDS, I don't know of any black person in the world who's published more on this. I've hosted, I know there was a time I could openly brag. I had more hours of radio interviews on this subject with experts than anyone else. I know I stopped doing this broadcast a few years ago because, quite simply, I got burned out on it. Constantly giving people a pathway to the future, and then you turn around and look and they're walking the other way, other direction. So it basically comes down to three main areas. One, how is HIV detected?
Well, how is it? It's a blood disease. Supposedly
through these HIV antibody tests, right?
Right.
Well, there's a big problem with that. Number two of the big problem is this evidence of a real epidemic. Big problems with the numbers on that. If you understand epidemiology, diseases, especially new appearing diseases supposedly sexually transmitted, have a fairly predictable behavior. And then number three, the treatment protocol for HIV diagnosis actually is so toxic that if you give those drugs to a perfectly healthy person, they will die of AIDS.
So you're saying, but the drugs that they're giving them, which isn't that the way they fight infection, by giving you a little dose of it to immunize your body to build up the antibodies to kill it?
You're talking about vaccinations.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting that you mentioned vaccinations. And interesting that you mentioned you don't like the wind blowing. I'm going to show you exactly what's happening and why this group came into Las Vegas recently.
You touched on it.
Yeah, this group came into Las Vegas to isolate the black community and get everybody tested before the end of the year. Problem with that is this is the time of the year when everybody gets so sick, and those are the people who tend to test false positives.
All right.
So, you talked about they give you a little bit of a pathogen in vaccines,
right,
to supposedly trigger an antibody response. With vaccinations, they say, well, if we've triggered an antibody response, then you have an immunity to that pathogen.
Right.
But in HIV and AIDS, they say, well, we cannot find the AIDS virus, but we found an antigen, which is said to be part of an antibody, which is said to be specific for HIV, so we can't find the whole antibody, but we found a little bit of proteins that identify this, and now you're going to die of the disease. We can't find the virus, but you're going to die of it because we have antibodies to it. That's a complete crisscross of logic between vaccines and the so-called AIDS epidemic. So, AIDS. A lot of people don't want to believe me, Brother Franklin.
No. That's why we dialogue, so we can figure out more of it.
So I end up quoting a lot of very well-respected scientists. And we quote from a lot of them, such as in Africa. Everybody is convinced Africa is the epicenter of AIDS. Africans are just dying everywhere. Remember when the epicenter of AIDS was Haiti?
Yeah.
They said the Haitians were the ones that brought it to the Western Hemisphere. Right?
We know who took it to them.
Well, what was it? You know, what was it?
But didn't they identify one specific individual, travel?
Patient zero.
Yeah, you're right. Travel agent.
Patient zero never made any sense, but it did make headlines. It never made any.
But they were able to
logical
chart
sense
his
at all.
travel and to see that the drug and the disease, whatever it is,
That's right.
followed this individual through these countries.
It had to be true because it was in the news.
All right, come on
Fake
now.
news.
You know I'm the original revolutionary, but some news, so even that
Well,
was not.
here's if that were a valid hypothesis, they predicted in the early days of AIDS that Haiti was the most hard-hit AIDS population in the Western Hemisphere. Am I correct?
Correct.
They predicted that between 1992 and 1996, that virtually the childbearing age population of Haiti would be wiped out. Guess what never happened?
They're still here.
It's not only still here, guess which country has the second highest fertility rate in the Western Hemisphere?
Well, Haiti, probably. Okay. Is it Haiti?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we doing Haiti as part of Black History Month. So we're going to learn about them.
And they started moving the epicenter. Okay, well, the Haitians don't fit the model. Quit talking about them. Now let's talk about Ugandans. Nobody cares about Ugandans. Nobody cares about the Cameroons. And so they took it to Uganda. And they say, oh, this is where it began. This is them Africans up in the bushes with them monkeys. Didn't they say that?
Yeah.
Problem is this. At the time that they were talking about Uganda, and everything I say is verified, at the time they were talking about the HIV prevalence among Uganda's population was as high as 26%. That's a quarter of the whole population. Well, 20 years later, the prevalence of HIV in Uganda was 4% and was falling even more rapidly. It's well under 3%. It had to have wiped out the population then.
It should have.
Problem was that Uganda had one of the world's fastest population growth rates during that time. Today, Uganda is the youngest nation on earth. Their population grew nationally about 3.31%. In the region where they say this thing started, it grew 3.37%. One of the highest population growth rates in the world.
Okay.
Now, they blamed it on Uganda's aggressive control of this. They took charge of
Well,
it.
they mean the anti-homophobic phobia that swept the country that was putting people to death.
Well, that's a whole nother topic.
But isn't that part of the eradication that they believe is espousing it? No?
No.
Okay.
There are other points where anti-homosexual attitudes come into play.
Right, that's what, all right,
And we can talk about that when we talk about this myth of the men on the down low. Okay? But what happened was they say, well, an aggressive program to shut down HIV in Uganda worked. Problem was, they opened up a warehouse and they found 10 years worth of condoms in the warehouse where President Museveni had warehoused them all. They were all being given by foreign aid agencies.
Right.
And they warehoused them all.
So they weren't actually being used as part of the practice that they said was suppressed.
They were not being used. And as you know, from my other book, Busted, the Latex Condom Conspiracy, when we talk about the ingredients that are on condoms, I said, and the New York Times quoted me, even though they poo-pooed what I had to say, they quoted me, and they said that I said in Harlem at the Harlem AIDS Conference that the more likely, the more often you use latex condoms, not condoms in general, latex condoms, the more likely you will react on these HIV antibody tests. And it wasn't just true with black people. It was true with French people. It was true with German people. Why? Because latex is a toxic substance. You're in an equatorial rainforest. You take a machete and you hack a tree. You injure that tree. You breach its surface. That tree has an immune response to plug up that cut with latex. So latex not only plugs up the cut, but it's a natural antibacterial. So therefore, when we push these latex condoms up into women's interiors, it causes a whole bunch of problems. Whole bunch of problems.
I know that. Greg used to talk about that.
Yeah, whole bunch of problems. And I have a book on that, Busted, the Latex Condom Conspiracy. So I want to get back to these three basics that we're dealing with. I like the way that journalist Elliot Fox puts it. And I quote him to kind of give us a basis for which we can have the dialogue. At any given point, feel free to ask me any question. Ask me the toughest, hardest question on this subject you got. But Elliot Fox, journalist, founder of the Association to Re-Evaluate AIDS, says, quote, AIDS, the Waterloo of the medical industrial complex, is said to be caused by a virus, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, detected by antibody tests which are proven to be grossly inaccurate, and treated by incredibly toxic pharmaceuticals that are definitely proven to cause the syndrome. So that's the basics.
So there's something that is happening then.
There are a lot of things that are happening. There is something that is happening with HIV/AIDS, correct? It's a ruse. It's a government program. In fact, this is what Tom Bethel, who works for the Hoover Institution, you're familiar with the Hoover Institution?
Yes, for sure, for sure.
He says, the fact is, I am now convinced AIDS is not a disease at all. It is a government program. Now, if you want to see the roots of this government program, I'm going to take you back to 1944.
So it's man-made then?
Yes, it is man-made, but the idea that a pathogen is causing this damage is the man-made idea. When in actuality, the 1993 CDC classification for full-blown AIDS says if you have one of 29 different diseases and HIV-positive determination, you have AIDS. If you have any one of those 29 different diseases, many of them have killed many people, still do. And you have no HIV positive, then you have that disease, such as pneumonia. Pneumonia is one of, I think, the number 2 killer. Malaria, pneumonia, tuberculosis, big killers on the planet. I think pneumonia is number 2.
And pneumonia, they say, for a lot of, like, dating myself, people like Rock Hudson in the original days of AIDS and the diagnosis, that's what they said they were dying of, was pneumonia. So are these symptoms of this dilemma of AIDS and pneumonia, how are they related? Or are they related? Or how can they make the context to relate them?
Well, it depends on your HIV positive determination. Because if you have pneumonia and you're HIV positive, you don't have pneumonia. You have AIDS. And now you get treated with the most incredibly toxic drugs ever given, including the most notorious of them all, AZT. I know you've heard about AZT. AZT was so bad that the man who created it, Dr. Richard Belz, he created AZT. He said the following about his own creation, and I quote, AZT, azithromycin, was shelved for 2 reasons. My study showed that it caused cancer at any dose and was too toxic even for short-term use.
But those are the early days of AIDS. Now they perfect. Have they perfected that?
They've reduced the dosage to the point that it doesn't kill you within 3 years, which was the claim back in these early days. And then they created all these other concoctions. But I want to take you back to, where does this begin? You're familiar with the book An American Dilemma by Gunnar Myrdal?
Wait, can I interrupt really
Yes,
really
yes,
quickly?
any question.
Okay, so then the pharmaceutical companies are making big money off the AZT or whatever that people are having to take. So don't the pharmaceuticals play a big role in this?
Yeah, think about this. You've been given a diagnosis while you're young. You're in your childbearing age years. Chances are life expectancy for you should run another 50, maybe 70 years. I can convince you to take a drug or a set of drugs every day to stay alive for the rest of your life. How much money is there in that? There's a lot of money in that.
But if you don't take those drugs, you'll die faster. I mean,
is that true?
Well, look at Magic. Magic would have been dead, and we know
Magic didn't take those drugs more than a few months. He got sick and he stopped taking them. Magic Johnson in 1998, I think it was 1998, published HIV is no longer detectable in my body. March 1998.
He stopped getting tested. That's what that was.
And Magic Johnson did bear at least one child born out of the act of love. But I want to take you back to the real beginning.
You mean since the HIV diagnosis?
Oh yeah.
Is his son the one that he had, the transsexual?
I don't know that much details, but I think they raised two children, right?
Yeah, I thought both of the children were his.
I'm making the presumption.
I believe both of them were him. Definitely the son is him, because remember they were
he's 6'8", so we know it's his son.
But they were concerned about him being born with AIDS.
Right. Well, if it's a hoax, then all of that was just an attempt to manipulate the people. Mm-hmm. Remember what one doctor said? He said, I don't think it's a disease, I think it's a government program.
Okay.
I'm going to take you back to 1944. The largest study of black people ever published was Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma, The Negro Problem and Modern Democracy. Are you familiar with this book?
I've seen the book, yes.
Have you read it?
Never had the pleasure of reading it all the way through, but I've heard it quoted from many times. And
well, I'm going to take you to page 167. Would you like to read?
Sure.
Okay. I want you to read chapter 7 is called Population. Subchapter 4 called Ends and Means of Population Policy. And I want you to read most of this paragraph. Begins right there. It says, if we forget about the means for the moment. And just read that directly. This is the largest report commissioned by Andrew Carnegie given to the United States government during World War II.
Okay. If we forget about the means for the moment and consider only the quantitative goal for Negro population policy, there is no doubt that the overwhelming majority of white Americans desire that there be as few Negroes as possible in America. If the Negroes could be eliminated from America or greatly decreased in numbers, this would meet the whites' approval, provided that it could be accomplished by means which are also approved.
That's good. I mean, it goes on. It gets even wilder 3 pages later when they say, okay, now we've set our quantitative goal,
which is the reduction of Negroes,
down to 0. As much as even 0, completely eliminated. Then they, on page 170, 3 pages later, they then start to list. I want you to flip to page 170. To list the means by which this would be accomplished. This is called eugenics. This is called population control. This is called ethnic cleansing. It's called genocide. Now, a lot of people don't want
part of all of that, but what about the white people who are dying the gay white men who really brought understanding and context to the disease to larger America? Because it wasn't until they started dying and their family members that they became concerned with it.
Yeah. What about the white gay males? How many babies were they contributing to their population team? We're talking about population war here. How many babies were they contributing to their team? And this is after Stonewall. This is when this trend is now moving this way.
Right.
And the conservative Ronald Reagan government and other governments wanted to stop this trend of young men deciding they can have all the sex they want. They just got to do it with other men, and now it's socially acceptable. Now, I'm not saying that to be quote unquote homophobic, a term that I find is an absolute ridiculously political term. But I am saying that to say this. This was all going on in the background. And I studied all of these machinations. So page 170, I think it begins right at the very top. They're going to read one long paragraph. Now they decided, okay, we decided a zero sum, let's get rid of the Negroes. Now they're talking about how do we do this?
In our further discussion of the means in Negro population policy, we might start out from the desire of the politically dominant white population to get rid of the Negroes. This is a goal difficult to reach by approved means, and the desire has never been translated into action directly and probably never will be. All the most obvious means go strongly against the American creed. The Negroes cannot be killed off. Compulsory deportation would infringe upon personal liberty in such a radical fashion that it is excluded. Voluntary exportation of Negroes could not be carried on extensively because of unwillingness of the part of recipient nations as well as on the part of the American Negroes themselves, who usually do not want to leave the country but prefer to stay and fight it out here. Neither is it possible to effectuate the goal by keeping up the Negro death rate. A high death rate is an unhumanitarian and undemocratic way to restrict the Negro population, and in addition, expensive to society and dangerous to the white population. The only possible way of decreasing Negro population is by means of controlling fertility. But as we shall find, even birth control for Negroes as well as for whites will, in practice, have to be considered primarily as a means to other ends than that of decreasing the Negro population.
Birth control. So what's the solution for HIV/AIDS? Condoms. Condoms, condoms, condoms. Birth control. And once diagnosed, how many, if a woman is diagnosed HIV antibody positive, how many children is it expected that she will have in her life after that? None. Right? She's cut off.
Right.
A man's cut off. So that's the way it works. That's what's been set up. Now this is not the only avenue. Abortion, the decriminalization of abortion in 1973 was the biggest windfall they could have ever imagined. Blacks didn't really participate in that for the first few years, but after about 4 years of the decriminalization of abortion, abortion became a black thing. It itself has reduced our population by 1/3, and those are all people under age 45. So when I suggest that the HIV antibody tests, of which the FDA has approved 31 of them, you can go to a website of any one of these antibody tests. Now, but I was looking for literature today to bring in, but I couldn't bring everything I had.
Oh, of course.
But you can see that virtually all of the HIV antibody tests, some of which have been secretly thrown away, some of which got pulled out of the market for the gay community, and then we saw them still being sold in the black community months later. You see, but the gays they rejected the saliva-based test because they said so many people were now testing positive, the test couldn't be legitimate.
Right.
But the test was now. I'm talking to on a radio station, and a black woman, she says, talking about AIDS, I says, well, I'll never get HIV tested. Oh, don't worry, they don't need the blood tests. We've got the saliva tests. And that was months after the gay community had rejected that test completely.
But they still use it in a lot of places, right?
But that wasn't, I remember hearing about the saliva test and the uproar that it brought in with the gay community.
Because too many people were testing for it.
Right.
Just too many people were testing positive. It
Right.
was like, where does this new explosive epidemic come from? It's not connected to anything real. Speaking of not connected to anything real, men on the down low.
Well, you're saying that that's not real?
Not real at all. Completely phony. In fact, there was, at one point, I think Ebony Magazine and a couple of other magazines, the Chicago Sun, maybe Essence, but I don't think it was Essence. They were publishing all these stories of men on the down low. And they were citing a CDC researcher's report on male-to-male sexual activity. And she published something, she says, stop. You cannot cite my research on male-to-male sexual activity because it has nothing to do with your quote-unquote men on the down low, which according to men on the down low, there's no way to gather that data. But just to show you how ridiculous it is.
Would this illness infiltrating into the heterosexual community indicate such a practice?
That might be an explanation. Remember, it was men coming out of prison. They dropped that. Then it was men on the down low.
Why did they ever drop that? I think that's how it got reintroduced into the black community.
That was what we were told.
Right, because
and it was in the news.
Right, no, it was reported everywhere. I mean,
it wasn't reported everywhere because there was no data to back it up. Now, I'll show you how ridiculous this is. In the United States, which city has the highest concentration of men who have sex with men?
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Which
sorry, y'all. Sorry about that.
No need to apologize.
I've been there. I seen it. Morehouse is not the Morehouse I went to.
It is what it is. It is a fact. Which city has the highest number of white men having sex with men?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. In Atlanta, the highest number of supposedly accessible men on the down low, making the presumption. But how come then they're saying that the women who are being infected by men on the down low, the highest city is Buffalo, New York?
So there's a prison right there. Osning.
So therefore, they're suggesting that men on the down low coming from Atlanta are going to Buffalo to have sex with heterosexual women. There's no trail. It makes no logical sense. Now, here's the other thing. They're saying women are being infected by men on the down low. Which city with the most homosexual white males would likely have the most homosexual or men on the down low whites? San Francisco. Show me any evidence of any claim that white women in the San Francisco Bay Area are at higher susceptibility to HIV infection. Show me anybody who's ever made that claim. It doesn't happen.
Well, what about in Atlanta?
What about in Atlanta?
Is there a higher percentage of African American women being affected?
Testing positive.
Testing positive.
Yeah.
But there are, though.
Testing positive.
Right. That's because they're having
for a test that is not a test for AIDS. It's a test for antibodies.
So being exposed to the HIV virus.
That are said to be exclusive to. Now, you got to understand these ELISA tests, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays. They take a little bit of blood, they spin it in a centrifuge, and proteins separate at different weight. They spin it through a glucose density gradient solution. They're saying that when these proteins separate, they can see them, and they have come to conclude that, well, this protein band, this one, I used to know more by off the top of my head, but they're in my books. These four indicate a likely HIV antibody presence.
I mean, the tendency to be exposed, that it could happen.
That you have been exposed to antibody.
Okay.
Well, problem is that those things aren't exclusive to HIV. In fact, they have found over 70 conditions. I think Christine Johnson from UCLA's research has said maybe as much as 100 different conditions that can test HIV positive, such as the tests don't work in Africa because everybody in Africa is malaria antibodies. And guess what show up as HIV positive on the antibody tests in Africa? I have that particular reference here, but if I need to find it, I'll find it. So, multiparous pregnancy.
Okay,
they're
break that down. What is that?
Yeah, it's not as confusing. Just a different language.
Okay.
Multi, more than one. Parous, meaning more than one incidence pregnancy. If a woman has 2 or more pregnancies, her body builds up a substance called HLA antibodies. If these HLA antibodies build up so high, she can trigger a false positive. Now, you had mentioned about the desert wind. Tell me what you know about coccidioidomycosis.
Nothing.
What you call me, man?
Coccidioidomycosis. It's one of the 29 different AIDS-defining diseases in America. Coccidioidomycosis. In fact, coccidioids, that takes us back to those Navy studies in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania in the 1950s where they were spraying coccidioids over the naval dock workers. Right. You remember that?
I've read about it. I know I wasn't around, but I remember reading about it.
Yeah. Well, they said that blacks have a particular susceptibility to coccidioids.
Right. And these were black workers in the yard.
They were black workers.
Right.
And they said they were concerned about a biological attack, but in actuality, it was them doing the biological
attack on us.
Right. Well, in the desert sands, there are these latent fungus, mycology fungus, spores. And when this wind blows up like it does, these spores go airborne. I live here in Las Vegas in the valley. I had to sweep my house 2-3 times a month from the buildup of that gray dust.
And that's that radioactive dust from the bombs they blew up 50 miles from here.
Man, I had to sweep my house 2-3 times. That gray dust is what carries coccidioids. We inhale them every day, all day.
Where did they come from then? If the desert pretty much is natural out here.
There are so many microbes, bacteria out here. I mean, just in the room we're in, we can't even detect their presence. If I take a deep breath, I may have breathed in 100 spores.
I'm sorry about that, man. I was out last night.
Okay. But when we talk about this time of the year, the time of the year when people have the highest number of disorders and diseases, their body has more antibodies building up to the point they have so many antibodies. Now people are being paid, because I found who was financing this new program.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's coming out of the new Trump administration. But we
know it's the government.
Well, we identified the African American Leadership Institute under Obama administration during the same time. Right, doing the same thing.
Every brother ain't a brother. Every bow tie ain't a bow tie.
Hey, it's America's agenda.
Right.
It may not have to do with Donald Trump or Barack Obama. It's America's
So it
agenda.
goes back to the
and
whole thing of
American
reducing our
dilemma.
numbers. The American.
That's
Man.
right. So let me just kind of bring this up to par. We can understand this dilemma now in much better context. I say to people who have been diagnosed HIV positive, if you really do believe in those tests, and I don't believe in them at all, but if you want to test HIV negative, come and do this for 90 days.
Living superfoods.
Eat the superfood nutrition and reduce the amount of gamma globulin that's built up in your body. In fact, I say that these HIV antibody tests are not capable of determining anything except for one disorder, hypergammaglobulinemia. That's a 10-syllable word. Hyper, gamma meaning alpha, delta, delta, you know, all that Greek stuff. The G, gamma globulin. Globulin is leukocyte material, white blood cell material. Anemia is a condition. So what is hypergammaglobulinemia? When you encounter a bacteria, the sentinels find it, they go back, they tell the killers, eliminate it, and then the third ones come through and say, so it won't come back again, let's put the gamma globulin in place.
And these are all natural things that we can do
It's
to
part
ourselves.
of our immune system.
But I tell you what, first off, we're running out of time. I'm hoping you'll be able to make time for us on our annual Wednesday night for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about food that day.
Yeah, well, we were talking about everything because we can't stop a genius. You know what I'm saying? So we just
Well,
got to glow in that aura.
I do
and we
appreciate
No, we
that.
appreciate you and taking time to break things down for us and dialoguing with us and being part of our community. How can folks reach you? Because you have a daily broadcast on the internet. You got books. Yes, Brother Keidi will be on the breakdown on Wednesday. We'll be talking about some of the soul food things that we'll be trying to digest.
And you know, that's the other thing. Soul food increases your likelihood of testing HIV positive.
See that, man? It's all again. Brother Keidi, how can they reach you? And you got a lot of admins. How can they reach you?
Yeah, you can reach
Thanks to the knowledge you bring us on a daily basis. We appreciate this broadcast. What time is your broadcast on?
I go on live mornings from 9 a.m.
There you go.
And I've been doing it for almost 16 years now.
Well, you are the man. You got the awards to prove it.
We're servants to
go.
a great people.
Brother Keidi will be back on the breakdown. So if you didn't get enough, because I know you didn't, there's more questions. He's going to tell us how to eat better for Thanksgiving and to stay on the planet a little longer. Keep that melanated stuff going.